What's up, folks? Matt McQueenie, Mix Minus Podcast. Saturday, June 29th. Almost here at July. Amazing. The month of my birth. I will be turning 37 on July 13th. 37. Wow. I still feel like I'm 16. But those are the breaks. That's how things go. I have been absolutely buried in my schedule. Not so much the work day, because things start to quiet down a little bit at work when you get towards summertime. But I've just been buried by the start of my MBA program that I'm doing at Rutgers Business School in Newark, right across the street from where I work. Very convenient. I've been buried, but I've loved it. I have absolutely enjoyed going to school again. I'm much more engaged. I think I'm doing pretty well. It's hard to tell, though, because we haven't even gotten to midterm time, which is going to be in about a week and a half. My classes are Tuesday and Wednesday nights, so I will have class this week, even though it is the 4th of July, because obviously the 4th of July is on Thursday. And then we'll kind of see where we go from there. But I have just really enjoyed it, just immersing myself in the materials, reading constantly, engaging with the classes with all of the level of my own reading I've done over the last decade and a half. And I just think I'm in a position where it's really rewarding to do this. Now we'll have to see how the grades come out, but I really have enjoyed it. I've gotten to know scores of people already. What is scores? Actually, I don't know. It sounded good, but dozens. I mean, I've met probably 6 to 8 people in each class. And in both classes, there are people who I know from each of the classes who are in both with me. So it's just we're all in this together type of thing. And it's just been really great. I mean, it really is kind of the kick in the butt. I don't know if the punch in the gut is the right thing, but it's just that it was that needed kind of infusion of enthusiasm and energy I was really looking for at this point in life. And again, not being very old, I'm older than the majority of the kids in the class, I think. Not kids, men, women, probably early 30s are a lot of them, but many do have kids, and all have major day jobs. And all are in this, if you call it a struggle, but it's sort of an exciting struggle. We're all in this thing together, going to school 3.5 hours a night for those 2 nights, or some will do 1 class. Some have actually done 3 classes, which is amazing to me because you really do need quite a bit of time outside of class to study and get the work in. I'm doing a marketing class, really an intro to marketing type of deal, a core class, and I'm also doing a core class on accounting. The marketing has come to me very naturally. It's just what I do. I've done it digitally this whole time, but all the principles are pretty much intact and the same. And if anything, when you do it digitally, it's just doing it with a turbo button. You're just doing a lot of these processes and protocols that you learn in marketing. You're just doing them in a very quicker motion than you would with the time and forethought that you can put into true marketing plans. Now, I would say a lot of those offline things are not as common today. I mean, they're still out there at major corporations, but so much is digital now that digital really touches even the things that are offline. So it's been really good, but the accounting has just been really tough because I'm just not familiar with a lot of these things. And there are people in the class who are very familiar because that's kind of the side of the aisle they're on at their jobs. Because you really come to see an MBA as qualitative and quantitative. There's the numbers and there's the marketing, right? Or there's sort of the qualitative aspects of the job. And very early on, I'm kind of seeing why a lot of major startups and businesses are based on 2 people, because you really got to have the numbers guy or gal, and you have to have the innovator and the thinker and the ideator. Even though a lot of ideas can come from financial backgrounds and that aspect. I mean, when you think of Wall Street, all the innovation is based on quantitative minds. But you really do see why the 2 sides of the brain, the 2 sides of the aisle are so important. And it's really been something that's been interesting for me to go through, learn about the accounting and the financial ledgers and journal entries and debits and credits. And you sort of know about this stuff living in the world, being an adult with your own financial lives. But it's another level when it's a company and business balance sheet, income statements. And so I'd say 80% to 90% of my time during the week outside of class has been spent on the accounting, because there's really no way to get it except practice, except going through problems continually, going through quizzes, online quizzes, going through the problems that are handouts that you have to do. And that's been a lot of my time. And I really want to be on the marketing end, but I know so much of the marketing that I like the challenge of the accounting. And I'm in a group with the accounting. I've been led into this little secret society where they will kind of look over each other's work during the week before an assignment is due. And so I'm looking forward to that, because it might bring some efficiency. But all the people that are in this program, it's really fascinating to kind of think about all the walks of life, or all the walks of life that they're in. You have prosecutors. You have people at pharmaceutical companies. You have people at brokerages. You have people at publishers, New York City publishers, and global magazines. And it really is something that has been enjoyable to be in contact with all these worlds this quickly. Networking is an important part of business and of life. And for me, I really come to find that it's the oxygen that kind of keeps me going, the ability to talk with people. I mean, it's very much the reason why I do this podcast, because the ability to talk and to talk with people interests me. Interviews interest me. I like hearing people's frame of mind. I like hearing how they found success in their life. I like hearing about their struggles. I just like hearing conversation happen. And so when you can kind of jump into that, it really invigorates you a bit. And it's not something to say badly about where I work right now, because it's a smaller company. I mean, you're looking at a company that has somewhere 15 to 20 to 25 people in the entire orbit of it. And many of the people are there for the whole time I've been there, a decade. So it's not that that's a problem, and it's not that you can't network with those group of people, but it's almost like family. So there's not that invigorating, enthusiastic aspect of meeting new people, bringing in new stories. And I've even thought that it might be really interesting to bring some of these classmates on as guests on the podcast to kind of talk about their professional lives and to kind of go over how they got where they are, why they're in school, what they're looking to get out of it. And just a lot of their stories are just, they're phenomenal. I mean, there's Middle Eastern doctors in the class, and I want to know why they're going for an MBA. I mean, more power to them. I think it's amazing. And I don't mean doctorate doctors. I mean medical doctors, residents. There's a gentleman from Africa who is the kind of accountant to the emigre population in the North Jersey area of folks from Africa, and they kind of go to him. He's cornered that market because they trust him to help them with their finances and understanding how important that is, especially in this country. And up and down the line, just all the people's stories. I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing the way they're able to accomplish what they're looking to do with this part-time program while having day jobs, while having kids, while having lives. The whole thing's just been great. I really, really have enjoyed it quite a bit. So about 8 days ago, I think it was June 21st, Toy Story 4 came out. And you say, why are you bringing that up? Well, one, I have a 4.5-year-old and a 4-month-old, though the 4-month-old doesn't really matter in this respect. But the 4.5-year-old has gotten into Toy Story, and I've had to actually rent it. Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3, and now Toy Story 4 comes out. I think the original one came out in 95, but it's such a good movie, and a lot of these Pixar movies are great for both kids and adults, and the lessons really go both ways for kids, and then they have higher meaning things for adults. Very good movies, but I think it'll be the first movie that I can take Liam to see. He's into the subject, and it's the fourth installment of a movie that he's been watching a lot of lately. He's been to a movie, I think, with his nanny, one movie, and he did okay. But this will be one that I think I can take him. But the reason I bring up Toy Story 4 beyond that kind of personal, anecdotal information is because of the origin story of Pixar, which again created Toy Story, the Toy Story franchise, and a lot of other movies that we've come to know and love in that same animated, computer graphic animated milieu, with this whole, the story playing to both little kids, toddlers, all the way up to adults where both sides can see them. Phenomenal art to do that. But to me, being a person who loves Apple, it plays into the origin story with Steve Jobs. And I brought this story up in class because in the marketing class, the professor likes to have the students kind of talk about what's been in the news the last week, if there are things that kind of touch on a lot of the things we talk about in class. And I don't like to be so direct sometimes in the connections. And so I saw, when I was looking at Google Trends, because I wanted to kind of just go over in my head again what things happened in the last week, I saw that Toy Story 4 had come out, and it led me down the rabbit hole, which I had been aware of already, but it's been years since I've really studied up on my Steve Jobs history, and it led me back to the story, which I just find so fascinating, I want to tell here. In the mid-'80s, Steve Jobs, for those who don't remember this, was actually basically fired and removed from Apple. He invented Apple in a garage with Steve Wozniak, Woz, as they call them, or Woz. And he had built the company up to a certain level of acclaim. And then he had brought in kind of a mentor CEO named, I know the last name is Scully. I think it was Tom Scully, but just Scully. Maybe Peter, I forget. But he brought him in to kind of be the adult in the room and to help grow Apple beyond what Steve Jobs was able to do, to kind of bring a professional glean on top of this. And so Scully was the head of Pepsi. He was the CEO of Pepsi at the time. When you look back, you say, well, how could someone who was the head of Pepsi make a difference at a place like Apple? Well, whatever, but Steve Jobs felt, I think, that he needed that quotient in the mix. He brought him in, kind of allowed himself to be mentored, and then ultimately was knocked out of the running, and Scully took over, and Steve Jobs was out. It's amazing when you look back at the Apple history and what we know of Steve Jobs, that he was actually out at Apple at one point in the 80s. And he, of course, made a triumphant return years later. But while he was out, he created a company called Next Computer, which is more akin to what we would expect he was doing in the interim. But the other thing he did was buy a small computer graphics company, basically a B2B, so business to business. They sold computer graphics technology to movie studios. And those movie studios would use it to create their movies. So this was a business to business thing. And this company was called Pixar. And he bought it from Lucasfilms, which of course is George Lucas, the great director. And he bought it for $5 million in about, I think, 1986. And then he also put another $5 million into the operating capital of the company so that they had the money to run. For the next 6 to 8 years, I'd say, they continued on as sort of just this behind-the-scenes technology company. But there was another founder in the company named John Lasseter. And John Lasseter, as a side gig, would create these beautiful stories with the animation. And he would do all the storyboard writing and creation, and he would just make these little stories on the side. And Steve Jobs would fund it anytime John Lasseter came and asked. Many people say that Steve Jobs' time at Pixar and with Pixar were some of the times they've seen him be the nicest person he ever was, because anyone who follows Steve Jobs knows that he was just a son of a bitch when he was at Apple and in a lot of his personal life. But it was kind of a son of a bitch in the way that he was a perfectionist, and he knew what he wanted out of things, and he knew what he wanted out of people. And when they didn't deliver that, it drove him absolutely off the wall. And when you look at all his creations, a part of you says, well, maybe he was right. Maybe he knew what he was doing, and maybe he knew how he was driving people, and maybe ultimately, when the ends justify the means of what those products were, maybe he was right. That's for another day, that discussion. But at Pixar, he was apparently very benevolent, kind of sat in the background. He would give a lot of great feedback, but he would not be so hands-on in the creation mix as he was at Apple or in many of the other things he did, including Next Computer. So at Pixar, again, 6 to 8 years, they continued as this kind of company. Then at some point, Steve Jobs, after he's funding a lot of the company and the John Lasseter projects, they decide that they're going to pivot into being a company that creates these movies that we've come to understand, these Pixar movies, before they actually were created. But what we come to understand as the Pixar movies, the innovation that these movies are, even though we don't think of that anymore, but man, were they innovative. And so they kind of pivoted to be a movie that makes, or to be a company that makes these movies, as opposed to makes the technology that other movie studios can use to make their movies. And their first movie ended up being Toy Story. And in 1995, and I think I had read, I don't know if this is completely verifiable, but I think I read that Steve Jobs continued to put money to the tune of $50 million over that next decade or so. $50 million of his own dollars on top of the 10 that he had put in initially to buy the company and then to capitalize the operating of the company. And so all this time he's funding it. He believes in this. And then he believed in what John Lasseter was doing. And they came to this time where they were going to make Toy Story. Steve Jobs, his kind of master of the universe, ability to negotiate and to strike great deals came into play here because they were able to create a partnership with Disney to put this movie out. And he also had Pixar go public, an IPO, an initial public offering, at the time of Toy Story's release. He understood this movie was going to be that good that if he had the IPO around the release, it would make the company be wildly successful on the market because people would see the promise right in front of them as the thing's going public. And we all know how phenomenal Toy Story is as a movie. It still holds up. It still is amazing. And the fact that it's animation, it's always current. It's never old. They never age. That's the interesting thing about this movie franchise. 23 years later, the toys are always the same age. They're always the same look. It's always the same animation. But they came out, again, wildly successful. IPO was amazing. They continued to put out a run of just phenomenal movie after phenomenal movie. Won Oscars, won this, won that, won every award you can think. And excuse me. And then at one point, Steve Jobs decides, I think, that they're gonna sell this because this is just an amazingly successful company. Steve Jobs had gotten back into Apple because Apple kind of acqui-hired him by buying Next Computer, and it was after that the franchise and all the Apple products took on the level we come to understand today with the Mac computer. Well, they'd always had a Mac computer, but the Mac computer we kind of understand today, the iPhone, the iPad, all those great products. And so he was also looking to kind of flip Pixar into an amazing money-making operation, which it already had been, but they were pretty much looking to sell. So by 2006 now, so Toy Story came out in 95, and then in 2006, after a string of hits using that technology, Pixar was purchased by Disney, by that partnership company who did the original Toy Story. And also, there had been a lot of kind of sort of bad blood with Michael Eisner, who had been the CEO of Disney at the time. But then when, who's the current? No, Michael Eisner was, now it's Bob Iger, right? So when Bob Iger came in, and he's been wildly successful. I mean, Disney's unbelievable when you look up and down all the things they have in their portfolio, but Pixar was just another huge piece. But Bob Iger came in and then decided, hey, let's do this deal. Let's buy Pixar. Disney bought it for $7 billion in an all-stock deal. And one of the most amazing things about this, so Steve Jobs, who we come to understand as Apple, right? When he was in the wilderness, when he was out of Apple the first time, he goes on to do kind of passion things. He did Next Computer, he buys Pixar, and who would have thought that it would end up with this? I love this line. When the deal closed, Jobs became the Walt Disney Company's largest single shareholder with approximately 7% of the company's stock, valued at $3.9 billion, and a new seat on its board of directors. So Steve Jobs owned 7% of Disney after this deal. And he's on the board of directors when he had been fired from his job, basically, from the company that he created. And he goes on to do this in the meantime. This is the thing that blows my mind. It's reported that more of his net worth came from Disney than from Apple. How unbelievable is that? More of his net worth came from Disney than Apple. And look how successful Apple was. Steve Jobs is an amazing person. Totally crazy. So that's where I led to the Toy Story 4. And so now here we are. I'll be able to take my son to it, and then I have this whole origin story in my mind, and I love it. I love the stories. So the other funny thing from class, in the qualitative classes, the non-math related classes, we do these things. We read case studies of businesses, of products, of points in time where new products or businesses are released or started, and and you go over that, and you go in class and you have discussions, and it's an assignment basically to discuss it in class and to read them. And so one of the first ones we did was about the Chase Sapphire credit card. So for me, and this really came out in discussion, I've never thought about a credit card before. I have one. I have an American Express. Why do I have an American Express? Because my parents had American Expresses, and because my mom initially, as you'll see on my card, it says member since 1982, the year I was born. So obviously I haven't been a member myself, but through family, the American Express was sort of the thing. That was my credit card. I've never thought twice about it. My mom made me another member on the credit card, so I had my own name credit card, so you could build credit, right? Because that was a big thing when you grow up, to build some credit so that you could eventually buy a car and buy a house, and you buy things on credit card, you pay it off so that you can get a good credit score. And so I was always just American Express. I never thought twice about it. Never thought twice about the fact that with American Express, it's a charge card, so you have to pay it off every month. Really, what's the point of a credit card if you have to pay it off every month, right? I mean, in truth, I'd still rather pay it every month, but you don't have the option to put something big on a credit card and then to pay some level of a minimum and then pay it off over time, because, if you buy something huge, you don't have the income coming in to be able to pay it off in a 1 month span. But I've never thought about it. Again, same thing with bank. I was always Bank of America because my family was Bank of America. And so this case study really got me thinking, because there's this whole market with credit cards. There's basically credit card hounds who look for the best deal continually. They look for the best promotion. The Chase Sapphire, the big promotion was, first of all, it's a thick card, right? It's a titanium, I think, card. You put it down on the table and you show you're a real man, you're a real spender. I never thought about that. I mean, you hear about it with American Express, black card with gold card, and they're heavy and they're this, they mean stuff. I never thought about it though. And there's these people who they get credit card after credit card. And then what these credit cards companies will do is put an amazing incentive on it. So they'll say, if you spend $4,000 on the card within a 3-month span, you get 100,000 points put right on your card. 100,000 points is a lot of points, and points can be used towards purchases on travel, travel's a big one, on experiences, right? And that's a big thing. That's like free money. And so when someone puts out a promotion like that, a lot of people are going to sign up for the initial thing. And I just never thought about this, but this whole process got me so interested reading about this case study. And I was thinking to myself, I will spend 6 hours researching streaming television services about who's better. Even though I'm happy with what I have YouTube TV, but I'm always looking to jump. Why? I don't know, but I'm interested in always looking, and nothing ever happens. And I'm spending all this time doing that. And it occurred to me, why aren't I spending time going over things like credit card deals, where it actually means something to your bottom line? It actually means you're going to come out of it with something. And if you're shrewd, you can kind of make some money along the way. And then I started buying into this whole thing. Oh, the big car, the Chase Sapphire. Oh boy. The Chase Sapphire Reserve and the Chase, Sapphire Freedom and all this. And the thing is, when you get these credit cards that are more premium, they give you the points. They'll also have fees attached though. So it might be $495 once a year you have to pay for the right to have this card. Now the points will mean more. They might mean 2 times points on on certain kinds of purchases. All this is a lot of stipulations and rules that you can kind of leverage and play with to get to a good place where you're kind of finding money. But again, American Express had this, and the American Express I had to pay a $95 fee once a year. I never thought twice about it. Again, I don't know why I wasn't thinking twice about these products. Now, a couple of years I got out of a Bank of America because I jumped to Ally. I like Ally. You can get 2.2%. I think it just dropped down to 2.1% on money market savings accounts. That's an amazing rate, to be honest, with no minimums on having money in there. 2.1, 2.2, that's anything over 2 is just phenomenal. So I did jump there, but I never thought about the credit card until I read this case study. The other piece is Apple announced a couple of months ago they're coming out with a card. So I was going to jump to the Apple card. But then the more I realized about the Apple card, it feels like saying, the Apple cart, right? But the thing I realized about the Apple card is, yeah, it gives you cash back. But you come to realize cash back is sort of the like the middle class of credit cards. Like cash back is I don't know. I don't want to say like lower class. It's not, but it's those are sort of entry credit cards when it's just cash back. When you have the points and all that stuff and you got to pay an annual fee, that's where you start getting into the premium product. And you really have to do the math to make sure that you're going to get the most out of the card where the fee offsets itself in the year. But the Apple card got me really thinking about this because I said, you know what? I love using Apple Pay. I love the interface Apple can provide. I love the transparency they could bring to charges because they show you what the charge was. They use machine learning to tell you what the thing you bought was from the true company. You ever get those credit card charges and you're like, what the hell is this? It's like Aardvark International from Muskegon, Mississippi or something. You're like, what? Have I been hacked? And then you realize it's just some back office kind of credit processing company for something you actually did buy. But it's bizarre. But apparently Apple's going to fix that because they're going to be able to tell you on a map what you bought, who it's from, who the true creator of the product you bought was. And it'll just bring transparency. It'll bring some of the, I think, financial tools to play, like you might get in a Mint app, where you can kind of see your spending on a continuum in nice kind of charted interfaces and dashboards. That interests me. I was really into it because I love Apple Pay, and I love that they were going to have this card. It wasn't even going to have a credit card number on it, and it was going to be just this beautiful aluminum card that was heavy. And so that got me thinking, it got me into the market a little bit. I had never thought about credit cards, but that did because I like Apple. It's sort of like the way I'm not a car guy, but Tesla has me thinking about getting a sports car, right? Because it's sort of coming from the frame of reference you're at, and it catches you because that is a company you believe in. It's a story you believe in. It's a company that does other products you purchase. And so the Apple thing, it was a no-brainer. I was totally going to jump to it. I still might jump to it and get the Apple card. Why not? Just to have it. But I'm definitely going to cut out my American Express at some point. I'm just trying to spend down the points I have on something, like maybe a travel experience before I cut the card off. But I ended up, so after all that said, I ended up going and getting a Chase Sapphire Reserve card immediately. And yeah, it's heavy, it's beautiful. I'm already spending up to the point where I'm close to getting that. It's now a 50,000 point bonus you get once you reach the $4,000 spent in 3 months on the card. Man, that 100,000 was great because they ended up having to cut it down because the finances don't really net out for the credit card issuer that much, but they wanted to get a lot of people into the product. And it is great. I mean, the interface on Chase is nice. They have events that are specific to Chase Sapphire holders. It's cool. And when I heard a lot of people in the class talking about it who are like experts in this field, just as consumers, they're into it. They know the deepest levels of this. And again, there are credit card hounds who just follow this. There's sites like NerdWallet was a big one that I was coming across. People love it. And you know what? Why not? it's actually doing something for you if you play it right. There was one guy in class who was saying that he opens and closes bank accounts all the time to realize the bonus you get for opening one and then cutting it and then opening another. And he's like, I've made thousands of dollars over the years by just opening and closing bank accounts. And no one really cares. It doesn't really hurt your credit. And I went, wow, man, people are deep in this stuff. But it's smart because I'm sitting there researching stuff that's not making me money, right? I mean, I could say, oh, that's silly. But again, I'm looking at streaming TV services day in and day out. I mean, who's crazy? We all love weird things. We all love what we love. We follow what we follow. I love tech. I love sports. I love media. I love movies. I love TV. Is that making me money? No. Is it edifying me? Is it making me a more well-rounded person? Probably. I love books, all that stuff. I'm smarter, but smarter for what, right? I mean, maybe I should focus a little more on this some of this stuff, but I did get the Chase Sapphire card and it hasn't changed my life. No, but it's been cool. It's cool to have the card, and I never would have even thought to do this. It's such a funny thing when you look at it like that. Speaking of TV, I watched the When They See Us miniseries. I think that's what it's called, about the Central Park Five on Netflix. Ava DuVernay is the brains behind it, and it's so weird with a subject like the Central Park Five. It's one of those things, I sort of know all of the weird tertiary parts of it. I know the whole idea that I guess they were wrongfully accused. I mean, I know this now, but I knew that they were a wrongfully accused group of young men of color, teenagers, who apparently raped a woman. I didn't know this at the time, but a white woman in the park. You knew it was Central Park, the Central Park Five, right? But I never thought to even look it up. I knew the aspect that Donald Trump bought ads on it and said that they should basically you should bring the death penalty back for them. I think that's what he said. So I knew all those things, but I never actually went and read about it. And I'm a researcher. Like, why did I not choose to ever go and look into it? But this is the beauty of art. This TV show comes out on Netflix. I'm paying for my Netflix subscription. Let's leverage that thing. And so I downloaded it and I started watching it. And it's a tremendous show. It's a tremendous reenactment of what happened and just how railroaded these kids were and how much they were kind of pushed to make testimonials and to turn against each other and to be really filled in with information so that the stories stuck. But even after that, they weren't good. The stories were not good. You could tell that they were being coerced and it just wasn't natural. And there was even evidence that they didn't do it, basically. But at some point, things become political. At some point, things become bigger than even the truth. And man, to go through this whole thing, to be brought up to speed on this subject, it's a tremendous, in a sad way, tremendous show. I still have one more episodes of the 4-part miniseries. Some of them are like an hour and 20, so it is kind of long at times, but it's digestible. It's only 4 episodes. It's really good. And it's one of those things, it's sort of like Chernobyl on HBO. Everyone's telling me I need to see it, and I do need to see it, and I will probably love it when I see it. Well, love it's not the word. I will probably be better for having seen it. The acting, I hear, is great, but the story is intense. The wider ramifications geopolitically are intense, and I kind of put the two together because they're subject matters that you don't really want to dive into because they're going to make you sad. But when somebody creates something that has to be watched, you watch it for the TV, and then you're edified on the story. You're educated on the story. And so now I've done this with When They See Us, and I will definitely do it with Chernobyl. I have to get there, but I have to get to the mind space to watch it. I know once I start, I'll dive in and I'll watch it, and you hear all the little side piece of like, or all the little parts that are just terrible, right? Something with a baby, something with animals, and it's probably not going to be as bad as I'm thinking. Like, I'm thinking the whole thing are animals melting, right? Babies being born with radioactive, it's probably small things. It's probably not as overt as I'm thinking. But when I hear those things, I'm like, do I really want to dive into that? So, all right, let's call it there. I'm sorry. I just haven't been able to get into doing this because school's just been overwhelming, but I love doing this, so I need to find a way to really hit it home. But I do have a baby crying in the background, so I'm going to have to go and get my 4-month-old. Again, this episode, I love when you say again and you don't mean again, because I didn't say it before. But I should say, the Mix Minus podcast is brought to you by Big League Pillows. Go to bigleaguepillows.com, get your customized jersey pillow with name on the front, name on the back, and number. Beautiful little pillow, customized gift, direct to consumer. Go to bigleaguepillows.com, use promo code Mix Minus, and you will get free shipping. About $35 to $38 is the cost of the pillow. You'll love it. It's great. And we also have professional licensing for many of the Major League Sports now, too. So you can actually go and get a pillow that has like the Dodgers on it with the Dodgers colors and everything. It's the real jersey. Things are happening. I noticed yesterday that the pillows are on Bed Bath & Beyond and Kohl's, and apparently they're going to be in actual stores like Target. And I'm like, whoa, man, this is happening. It's crazy how it's happening. I'm so excited to be involved. So I'll talk to you later, folks. Thanks for listening.